What's up, hello, my name is Emma, and today I'm going to be giving you guys some recommendations for Black History Month. Last year I also made a recommendations video talking about some of my favorite books by Black authors about Black main characters, so if you want to check out that video for like double the recommendations, it's in the description below. And before I jump into this video, I would just like to once again make it very clear that I'm aware that as a white woman I don't have the ability to provide the most authentic review of the Black experience because I've never lived it. So if you would like to discover more Black creators who would be able to do that for you, in addition to just making really dope content all the time, I've linked some of my absolute favorite Black booktubers in the description down below. Please go check them out, support them, show them some love, because that's really what Black History Month is all about. And also, we should be supporting Black creators all year round, so now you have the tools to go forth and do so. Additionally, this video does contain a paid promotion with Disney Book Group for the release of The Everlasting Rose by Danielle Clayton, which is the sequel to The Bells. I'm super pumped to be working with them because I actually included The Bells on my recommendations list last year because it was a fantasy novel I really enjoyed, and if you check out last year's video, I do actually have a clip of Danielle Clayton talking about The Bells that I think is pretty cool and like one of my favorite parts of the video. So go check the video out and then we can continue here. The Everlasting Rose comes out on March 5th and it is the sequel to The Bells, which is a young adult novel that takes place in a fantastical New Orleans where the people of Orleans are born gray and damned, and only the bells are able to restore them to a place of beauty. Camellia is a belle, but she wants to be the favorite, the most revered belle there is in the kingdom, but when she arrives at court, she finds out that her powers and her abilities are actually much more dangerous and powerful than she ever realized, so she has a lot of difficult decisions to make in terms of protecting herself and her sisters or doing the queen's bidding and saving the princess. I really enjoyed The Bells. It has a very decadent, gorgeous writing style. It's a fun story with diverse characters. Like, what more could you want? So definitely, if you have not checked out The Bells yet, you definitely should, and then you can pick up the sequel, The Everlasting Rose, which comes out very soon. I'm sorry, I know this video is really long, but we finally made it to the recommendations portion of this video. Now, the majority of recommendations in this video are contemporaries because, like, what can I say? I just really love young adult contemporaries about marginalized teens. But I understand not everyone loves contemporary, and it's also really important for us to boost science fiction fantasy novels that have a diverse cast because there just are not enough of them. So I just want to like quickly mention a few that I would really recommend if that's more your genre. The Diviners, Renegades, Ace of Shades, Six of Crows, Passenger, and the fourth book in the Lunar Chronicle series are all books that have a main character who is Black. So if you guys are interested in more science fiction fantasy with Black main characters, I'd highly recommend all of these, but I'm just like not dedicating this video to them. And again, The Bells and The Everlasting Rose also go under that category. All right, we're finally at like the real recommendations part of this video. I'm sorry, I just had a lot to say, but the first book I really want to recommend to you guys for Black History Month is Pride by Ibby Zaboy. Pride is a modern Pride and Prejudice retelling that follows a girl named Zuri who is Haitian and Dominican living in Brooklyn during a time where gentrification is weighing really heavily on her because she's someone who has a ton of pride from Brooklyn. But things get shaken up on Zuri's block when a rich Black family called the Darcys move in across the street from her. I really loved Pride. I just read it this month. I listened to the audiobook nonstop for like 2 days, and I'm genuinely surprised with how much I enjoyed it as someone who's never read Pride and Prejudice, so I can't exactly attest to how accurate of a retelling it is or how close it is or anything of that sort, but by itself, on its own, it was really great. Pride is equal parts a cute, fluffy love story while also dealing with some intense topics such as, again, gentrification, racial tensions, and even classism and how that varies among different races. Pride doesn't necessarily have my favorite cast of characters I've ever read. Like, I was thoroughly annoyed with Zuri and Darius and like everyone throughout most of the novel, but there's so many elements that are very charming about it. I love the big family dynamic in this story. It was super fun to read about, and that's always an element I enjoy in books. I surprisingly really loved the inclusion of poetry in the story. I had no idea going into this book that Zuri was a poet and that there was going to be poetry in this book, and as someone who didn't love poetry, like I really enjoyed it in this book. Ibby Zaboy has just like a beautiful poet's voice, and it really shined through in this novel combined with Zuri's passion. It was just so great. It was a super fun and addictive, fast-paced read. Ibby Zaboy is just such a talented author. Like, I believe American Street won like a national book award, or it was at least nominated. Let me check. I feel like I'd be doing Ibby Zaboy a disservice. She's a National Book Award finalist. I have not read American Street yet, but I'm so excited to, and I can't wait to just read everything she puts out because she's super talented. The main reason I picked up Pride is because I got to see Ibby Zaboy at Epic Reads Day last year. I will leave a link to my vlog of that day if you want to to check it out because I have some cool footage from her. But just hearing her speak and what an elegant woman she is, as well as like seeing the cover design of this book, the whole process, and how like it now mirrors a lot of classic Brooklyn architecture. It was just a really cool experience and made the book very memorable for me. So I loved it. If you are interested, you should definitely check it out. The next book I'd like to recommend to you is The Sun is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. I don't know why I didn't include this book last year because I read it many years ago, but now is its time to shine. The Sun is Also a Star is a novel that takes place over the course of just one day. Our first main character's name is Natasha, and in 12 hours she is being deported back to Jamaica after spending the entirety of her life in America, where that is really her home, but she is being forced out of there because of her immigration status. And our second main character's name is Daniel, who is like the perfect Korean son. He always gets good grades and he always lives up to his parents' expectations, but when faced with his future, he's starting to question if that's what he really wants for his life. So yes, this is a love story that runs its complete course over just the span of a few hours, and you would think this would be like the worst case of insta-love in the entirety of YA publishing, but you would be so wrong because it is incredible and definitely does not read like an insta-love story at all, which makes it so unique. Nicola Yoon has such an easygoing, lovable writing style, and one thing that particularly stands out to me about The Sun is Also a Star is that the book isn't only told from Natasha and Daniel's perspectives. All throughout the story, there are these seemingly insignificant characters that either have one appearance or multiple, but we see the story through their eyes, and it was just really refreshing. I've read so few books like this, but I really enjoyed it. Overall, The Sun is Also a Star is just remarkable. It has well-developed characters, the right amount of conflict and romance, and just so much to love about it. The movie for this book is also coming out very soon. I don't exactly know the date, but the trailer looks amazing, and I know it's going to be great. So if you have not read The Sun is Also a Star yet, it's the perfect time because the movie's coming out. The next book on my recommendations list for Black History Month is Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is another one that I just read this past February and absolutely flew through. Like, this is a pretty like hefty contemporary novel for young adult fiction, and I also flew through it in like 2 or 3 days. It was that good. This story follows a Black girl named Claudia whose best friend named Monday goes missing and no one seems to care. Monday stops coming to school and no one is concerned. Monday's mother doesn't offer any information about Monday's whereabouts, and just no one seems to take Claudia's concern seriously about how her best friend has disappeared without a trace. Oh my gosh, this book is so heart-wrenching. Like, I finished it maybe like a week or two ago and I'm still being hit hard by it. Firstly, it is a beautiful story of a platonic friendship between two girls in their teens. The relationship between Monday and Claudia that is revealed through like flashbacks in like a before section of the book was just so heartwarming and just gave me all the friendship feels. If you're someone who loves friendships in books, this is one you absolutely need to put on your radar. But also this book deals with, of course, some really intense topics. When I met Tiffany D. Jackson at the launch for Monday's Not Coming, she talked a lot about how this book was inspired by the true events of Black young girls who have gone missing all throughout the country and haven't been found and no one is really looking for them. So it just takes a true reality of our lives and turns it into fiction that I think is really consumable for readers. Is that even a word?
Consumable.
I just checked that it is. But yeah, it's still a very gritty, intense book. Like, if you're looking for something light, read The Sun is Also a Star, but if you want your heart ripped out of your chest, read Monday's Not Coming. One thing I didn't like about Monday's Not Coming is the timeline and the time jumps throughout this story. It's not chronological whatsoever, and it is constantly jumping between before, after, 1 year before the before, or like 1 week after the after. It was really bizarre, and I don't think it contributed to the storytelling at all, but it didn't change the fact that like it was still easy to make sense of in my head. It just wasn't pleasant to read. Also, there's one plot twist that I just personally didn't love, but overall, Monday's Not Coming was a spectacular read. It's a total whirlwind of emotions. Like, one moment you'll be super in your feels about friendship, reading about the strong, deep connection that Claudia and Monday have, and the next you'll be like, wow, everything sucks. Life is so unfair. There is so much injustice in this world, and I had to subject myself to this because it's real. Great book, highly recommend. The The next book on this list is the only single author on this list who is not Black. The author is Puerto Rican, but the story itself is so important that like I couldn't not talk about it, especially because it's so underrated and I want more people to read it, but that is Anger is a Gift by Mark Oshiro. Our main character's name is Moss. He is a Black teen that deals with anxiety and panic attacks, and he's currently still dealing with the after effects of his father's murder, which was unjust during a protest. Moss's high school does not receive the appropriate funds to create a supportive and healthy environment for its students. The infrastructure is crumbling, and they have just installed metal detectors and a on-site police presence at all times. Moss and his friends are tired of being treated more like criminals than students at their own school, so they decide that it is time to take things into their own hands, even if they don't feel as powerful as the people they're going up against. I love me some teen activism books. I adore stories of young people who find an issue they're incredibly passionate about and use that passion to empower others and really create change in their communities. If you're someone who really loves books like that, like The Hate You Give and Dear Martin, Tyler Johnson Was Here, or even not specific Black stories like Moxie and the Nowhere Girls, Anger is a Gift has to be next on your list. Something really notable about Anger is a Gift, it is quite possibly the most diverse young adult book I've ever read. Moss is also gay, and the boy he begins dating in this story is Hispanic as well as an undocumented immigrant, and just all of the side characters and Moss's friends throughout the story are different variations of people of color with different sexualities, genders. There's non-binary folk, there's disabled folk. There's just like a lot of rich culture in this story that does reflect the colorful society that we do live in today. Yes, these characters are of course more than these specific identities that they have. They have their own individual motivations and personalities that are described in the story, but it is really important to note when we have a cast that is this diverse, because young adult, like, most can't relate. Personally, the writing of Anger is a Gift is not my favorite in the entire world. I just felt like it could have been condensed. Like, again, this is a pretty big young adult contemporary novel, and I think that it was just a little too wordy for my taste, but overall the story is what really draws me to this novel. As I said, this book has a lot of teen activism. It focuses on things like racism, police brutality. There's a lot of violence in this book. Like, it's not an easy book to read by any means, but throughout all of the harsh emotional events that occur throughout the story, there is this theme of taking the anger you feel at the world and transforming it into something good, and that like it's valuable that you feel this and it can mean something in living the life that you want to lead. And that's something that I thought was really powerful and something that a lot of teens need to hear. So I greatly enjoyed this book. If you're into all the things I talked about, I definitely recommend you pick this one up. The next book I'd like to recommend to you guys is actually a fantasy novel, and I'm sure you can assume what it is, but it is Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. I did briefly touch on Children of Blood and Bone in last year's video. I hadn't read it at that point, but it was going to be my next read and the book was coming out in like a few weeks, so I really wanted to let people know about it. But I have read it now and I really enjoyed it, so I can give you like an official Emma Books endorsed recommendation. Children of Blood and Bone is a West African inspired fantasy novel that takes place in the fantasy land of Orisha. In the past history, magi, who are people with magic and were able to manipulate elements, were killed by the king and greatly oppressed, and since magic has now just disappeared without a trace, their children, known as the diviners, are still dealing with a lot of repercussions from the kingdom. Our main character's name is Zelie, and she is a young girl given the opportunity to bring magic back to her people. So she teams up with her brother as well as the princess, who has recently run away from the castle, and they set off through Orisha looking for these magical objects to bring magic back, while the prince of the kingdom is hot on their tails and intent on eradicating magic forever. Listen, Children of Blood and Bone was so good. It absolutely lives up to all of the hype surrounding this book before its release and now that it has been out in the world. The world and history of Orisha is so intricate and well developed. I loved the magic system. It was super fun to read about, and I also thoroughly enjoyed a lot of the characters that we get their perspective from in this story. There are so many scenes in this book that are entertaining, intense, action-packed, suspenseful. Like, this is a fantasy novel that will have you on the edge of your seat because there's so much to get through and all of it is fantastic. I haven't personally watched all of Avatar: The Last Airbender, but this book is so frequently compared to it, and like people who are really big fans, like Hannah from A Clockwork Reader, always say this is like the Katara Zuko love story that everyone wanted. So do with that information as you will. So yeah, Children of Blood and Bone was amazing. Although I'm someone who considers fantasy to be one of my favorite genres, I'm always a little wary with like super high high epic fantasy. It's really difficult for me to commit to a new series with a new author I don't previously love, but Children of Blood and Bone really surprised me, so like a recommendation for a super high fantasy novel means a lot coming for me, so you should definitely read it if you have not already. And the final book on my list of Black History Month recommendations is Finding Iman by Brandy Colbert. I read Brandy Colbert's first book, Little in Line, and I recommended it in last year's video, and then I just read Finding Iman this past month and I loved it just as much. Our main character's name is Iman, and she is a black girl living in Los Angeles approaching the end of her high school career. Iman has spent most of her life relentlessly playing her violin. It is something that has always brought her joy and comfort, but as she is getting to the point where she might need to start making decisions about her future, if she wants to go to a music conservatory or not, she starts to question if her love for her violin is enough. Finding Iman is a book that really surprised me. I already knew that I enjoyed Brandy Colbert's writing style. I think she has a great teen voice, which is like really important when you're writing YA books, but she also makes her characters like more mature and self-aware, and so I really enjoy reading like the internal thinking of her characters because it's just always so insightful. But I had some different expectations going into this book. I knew that Finding Iman dealt with teen pregnancy, but I thought that was like the main plot of the story, and it's actually not. I thoroughly enjoyed the pregnancy plotline. I thought it was handled perfectly, and it is like a very important story for people to hear, but I thought it was going to be like the main plot, and it was actually not introduced until much later in the story, which left room for a lot of other things to get developed that I wasn't expecting, and that made me enjoy the book even more. Firstly, Yvonne's story of figuring out what she's passionate about and coming to terms with her current relationship with her music was really enjoyable. Like, I was a band geek when I was in elementary school, so I can relate to a lot of what she was saying, and I just thought the whole storyline about a girl like figuring out what is important to her, what is she capable of, and what does she want to try and like actually do with her life instead of it being determined by her past was so enjoyable. I also loved the family dynamics in this story, as it was pretty unconventional and not what you typically read about in YA. Essentially, Yvonne's mom left when she was younger, and she's like still dealing with the effects of that, but she's also living with her father currently, who's kind of absent from her life. Like, he's a super successful chef and he like provides for her, but she doesn't have a great relationship with him, and watching that develop along the course of the story was super fulfilling. There is also like a little love triangle in this book, which honestly frustrated me a little bit, and I wasn't too happy with Yvonne for part of the story, but overall, like, the point of the love triangle is not as much about the romance, and it's really focused on like how Yvonne interprets everything that's going on in her life and her relationships with different people, and it took like a different take on love triangles, which I really enjoyed. Finding Iman is just one of those books that I'm genuinely happy I read. I had such a great time listening to the audiobook of this story, getting to know Iman, and just watching her grow as a character. It was really enjoyable. So if you're looking for like a short, sweet read that also deals with things like race and teen pregnancy, highly recommend. So that concludes this year's Black History Month recommendations. I really hope you guys enjoyed. In the comments below, I would love to know if you have any thoughts on the books that I mentioned in this video, or if you have any additional recommendations for me to continue reading throughout the year. I would really appreciate it. And again, don't forget to check out all of the Black booktubers that I left in the description of this video and send them some love. But that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon for a new one. Bye! Oh my god, I just hit my light.